The second is then to clear the negative karmic energies that we all carry from past lives on this planet. They've accumulated whenever we have crossed over in difficult circumstances. Those energies are built up in the emotional body in particular. And so there's a necessity, it's a cosmic law that you cannot move from one level of consciousness to the next and take negative energies which are formed on one level onto the next. And so there is a requirement to clear those energies. Now, because of the nature of consciousness that we've been in, we haven't understood this. We haven't remembered, and we haven't been practicing how to go about this process. And there's recognition that that's the case. And so a dispensation, if you will, has been granted by the karmic board to enable this to be done simply and easily with through a simple command that we've been given. And so we're using that in our work currently, and with time that will be made available to healers around the world. And so far, that number of healers that have come forth who have felt prompted to contact me in one form or another, asking if indeed they are to bring those commands forth, is over 350. So that team will continue to grow. And the second step then is to rejuvenate the physical body, the third step. First is to acknowledge your creator. Second is to clear your negative karmic past. Third is to rejuvenate the physical body. And that rejuvenation process is not just about winding off a few extra years that certainly I've gathered relative to what I would consider to be an ideal age, but it's about bringing forth the perfection in the physical body, which would not have been there when we were at that younger age, and also it brings forth what I would call the first phase of what's known as the Adam-Cadman physical body. If you're aware of that term, Lisa, I'm not sure, but it's the form the physical body will have beyond ascension. And so it really involves those three steps.
I am familiar with the term Adam-Cadman. I did a workshop with a gentleman here by the name of Alton that went for, well, I actually did 3 different levels of that workshop, and one of the things we were working with was activating our Adam-Cadman light bodies. So, yes. And that's the first, hearing the term from you is the first time I've heard it since, and that's going back 5 or 6 years.
Alton's a guy in Queensland, yes?
He's since passed. He was based in Sydney, I believe, and Alton Camadon was the name he went by, and he was also a channel and channeled information from Thoth, or Thoth, depending on your pronunciation, and created what was called the Melchizedek method, which is now called the Camadon Academy. And again, it was one of those stepping stones on my path, and I got a great deal out of it.
Right.
What I wanted to ask was, do you see this process as a gradual one leading up to and right through 2012 and 2013, or as some, do you see the day, 21st of December 2012, as being an exact monumental date where an event is going to happen?
That's a good question, and there are lots of people, as you say, who are talking about this being a period of time where change will come forth. And if you understand how energy gateways are used by the spiritual hierarchy to bring energies forth, and we have messages for all the full moons, all the solstices and equinoxes and so on a page called the 2012 timeline on our the 2012countdown.com website. And if you track some of those messages, you'll begin to see how these gateways are used. And so if you build that understanding, and it's not something new. If you look in some of the older traditions, if you look amongst the yogis in the Himalayas, for example, or indeed in Buddhism and other places, you will find recognition of the solstices and equinoxes and the power of those events. So this is not something new. It's quite old. For a large part, it's been lost. And indeed, if you look in things like Stonehenge and Chichen Itza in Mexico from the Mayans, how that extraordinary pyramid is lined up so that there is a shadow snake comes down the side of that pyramid at the equinox 2 days a year. The building is built such that displays, and there's much more in terms of expression of the alignment. So there's been a long-term recognition in many traditions and cultures of the importance of key gateways. And the reason I explain that is because what we have come to understand is that indeed it is a very precise date. For 3 days the solar wind will stop, as it did in 1999 for a couple of days, and that's on NASA's website that happened. They don't know what happened, but it was some key preparatory work that was being done. And so there is a precedent for that happening, and there will be an imprinting upon the planet of extraordinary energy, and that will last for 3 days. And those that have not cleared their negative karmic energies will not survive those energies. So it's pretty, there's a lot written about the so-called Day of Judgment. And in a way you could look at that as being the Day of Judgment. And it's not really, in a sense, it's a judgment we mete it out to ourselves. We have a very simple choice to make, whether we acknowledge our Creator and prepare or whether we don't. It's that simple. The door's open for everyone. It really is that simple. And so I've come to understand that that's really what those traditions are talking about, even though it's not well understood. So that's the first step. The second step then, and what those energies will do, by the way, is it will change the nature of every particle on the planet, not just humanity, but the entire nature of all matter. The second event is the birth of an aspect of the being known as Marietta on the 28th of December 2012. Now, this gets into your question about the link to Christianity. Who Yeshua is an aspect of a being known as Marietta. Marietta is the first soul created after the cherubim and seraphim angels. And so Yeshua was an aspect of Marietta that came to the planet. And so what will be coming forth on the 28th of December is the birth of another aspect of Marietta. And the reason that individual is coming is to trigger the reawakening of the human DNA. We had over 2,000 DNA strands before the fall in Atlantis. You hear people talking about, 3 or 12 or whatever. It was over 2,000. And so the birth of that individual will trigger the reawakening of over 2,000 strands of DNA. It's hard to imagine what it will be like to be a being with that number of active strands once more. And a lot of those were in the etheric. It was bridging from the physical to the etheric. So all of those DNA strands are not just in the physical. And so and then the third step, which will occur at the March 2013 equinox, will be the ascension process. So there you have it.
There you have it. Well, you've touched on a couple of things that I'm familiar with. One is the 3 days. I've heard theories about the fact that with galactic alignment, the planets are going to line up and we will have 3 days of darkness. And it's in those 3 days that you're talking about, these processes will go on.